Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And okay, so according to a new report, Sony might be working on a handheld console after all. After all the speculation, it appears it's actually happening. And as much as I'd like to celebrate this news, because you all know me, I love the Vita, but hang on before you get too excited here. This isn't the PlayStation Vita 2, but instead, this is something vastly different. And yeah. I think we need to talk about it today and what Sony is possibly thinking here. Also, in other news, Nintendo is seemingly teasing a new Mario game, and suddenly the crowd goes silent, shocked in what they had just heard. I know. Very surprising news, a new Mario game in development. But hang on, I do think that there's actually something quite interesting here that may excite fans out there. So, a lot to get into today. As always, hit those buttons below, and also a big shout out to my patrons. You guys are absolutely awesome. Thank you all just so much for your support. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. But yes, without a further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right into the video, starting off with Octopath Traveler 2. This game released back in February, and it's been well received thus far. It has an 85 overall score on Metacritic, which is higher than the original game. I myself find it to be much better, and actually just one of the better JRPGs to release here in recent years. I would actually highly recommend it for fans of the genre. Don't sleep on this title. But there was one surprising absence to its release. After Square Enix decided to port the original Octopath Traveler to Xbox, including a Game Pass release, and ignored PlayStation, well, they turned around and decided to change course with the sequel as they released Octopath Traveler 2 for everything, including PlayStation, except for, interestingly enough, Xbox. So, yeah, their decision-making has just been all over the place for the series, and by this point, the community is just kind of like, okay, what's the deal here? Well, Square Enix has now responded to that, and this is their explanation. So, as you can see here, they say, of course, we have heard all the Octopath Traveler fans out there asking for a PlayStation release, and the team also wanted to challenge ourselves to try to get the game on as many platforms as possible. Apart from that, we made the decision internally after observing the sales of other titles. They then were asked about the first game releasing on PlayStation, in which they responded, we did look into it. However, we wanted to focus all our efforts on developing Octopath Traveler 2, and this also links to your next question about whether you need to have played the first game to enjoy Octopath Traveler 2 or not. To reduce misunderstandings about this, we decided against trying to align a PlayStation release of Octopath Traveler with the release of Octopath Traveler 2. So, I mean, I don't know. This is a whole weird situation, but ultimately, it appears their decision was based on internal data. There was some speculation that Sony may have locked Octopath Traveler 2 from releasing on Xbox. That's kind of a big discussion right now with the Congress looking into the whole Japan situation. But based on the wording here, that doesn't actually appear to be the case. At the same time, though, again, based on the wording here, it does sound like the first Octopath Traveler might eventually be ported to PlayStation, and hopefully the same can be said for Octopath Traveler 2 and Xbox, because this really is a great game, and honestly, I just like to see it be enjoyed by everybody out there. This, however, is Square Enix that we're talking about, so you never really know when it comes to them. Now, we also got an update on The Last of Us Part 1 situation for PC. This has probably been one of the worst PC ports for a high-profile game in recent memory, and it's now gotten to the point that Valve has stripped it of its deck verified status. Truthfully, I don't really know how it was ever verified in the first place, considering all the different problems that it has, and that's not just for the Steam Deck. I mean, the PC version in general just has some major issues with it crashing consistently. There's visual glitches, and yeah, you get the point. It's been a very rough launch. But Naughty Dog has been pushing out some different hot fixes and everything, and they do plan on releasing a patch this Friday. Hopefully that helps at least some. But unfortunately, if you were planning to play The Last of Us Part 1 on the Steam Deck, it sounds like that might be a longer wait, as Naughty Dog confirmed that they're prioritizing PC patches over Steam Deck compatibility. Now, to be fair here, any fix should theoretically improve the Steam Deck version as well, but all in all, it might take some time before this game gets to be where it should be. It's just really an unfortunate situation, though, because this this is a great game and a welcome addition to PC, or it should have been, but Sony, they have to do better with their PC releases going forward. This is just not acceptable. Simply releasing games on PC, that's not the primary goal here, but rather they need to meet that with quality launches, and hopefully this will be a big learning experience for them going forward. Now, speaking of Sony, let's just go ahead and get into this big and oddly surprising story. So a couple days back, Tom Henderson, which has often been a reliable leaker, especially when it comes to Sony hardware, well, he leaked out that Sony had some new hardware in development that looks to release before the PlayStation 5 Pro, and that he's curious on what the competition's reaction is to this device when it eventually gets announced. So that kind of suggested that this is something just a little bit different that's going to catch the competition off guard, and that's when fans started to speculate this could be possibly a new handheld console. Maybe Sony is going to attempt to enter the handheld market once again. Well, if you're like me and you want this to happen, I mean, I love the Vita myself. Well, the good news here is that Tom Henderson followed up on that vague remark with a new report today that, yes, claims that Sony is indeed working on a new PlayStation handheld, or kind of. However, this is not a follow-up to the Vita as some of us were hoping. Instead, after reading the report, I've come to the conclusion that this is actually more like the Wii U than anything else. Yeah, it is different, so let's just go and check out the report here, which says, following days of speculation, Insider Gaming can report that there's a new PlayStation handheld in development. Codenamed the Q Lite, the next PlayStation handheld is the next piece of Sony hardware that aims to be yet another piece of hardware that requires the PlayStation 5. Insider Gaming understands that the Q Lite is not a cloud streaming device, but instead it uses remote play with the PlayStation 5, a feature that console giant has been pushing these past couple of weeks. Sporting adaptive triggers up to 1080p and 60 frames per second, the new device will require constant connectivity to the internet. As for the console's physical features, early prototypes show the console will look a lot like the PlayStation 5 controller, but with a massive 8-inch LCD touchscreen in the center. The device sports adaptive triggers for haptic feedback and will include what you would come to expect from a handheld: volume buttons, speakers, an audio input jack, etc. So, yeah, okay, if this report is true, this is certainly not what I was expecting, nor do I believe what most fans were expecting. I mean, okay, so here's the thing. I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of a Wii U controller-like device. Everybody's kind of jumping on this being a brand new handheld console, which I don't know if that's necessarily entirely fair, because in how it's described, it actually sounds more like a peripheral, a glorified controller with a screen, which I don't think is necessarily a bad idea on its own. I think that's how they need to advertise this thing, as a controller. And if they do release it at a competitive price, let's go and say $150, okay, you might have my attention, but even then, it does still face one big problem. The fact that this supposedly requires constant internet connectivity limits its reach quite a bit. That would mean that it is a lesser version of the Wii U tablet, which did not require internet. So that's kind of the sticking point here. If it didn't require internet, okay, that's a little bit more enticing. But instead, now we're kind of getting into the question, how does it actually differentiate itself from devices that can already remote play PlayStation games? I mean, this is not a new thing or anything like that. You can remote play PlayStation games on your phone. You can do it on the tablet. Or, hey, if you have the Steam Deck, that is another option as well. So with all of that, right now and how it's currently being described, it seems to just kind of boil down to it's a dedicated remote play device, similar to what we've seen for dedicated cloud-based gaming devices. If you don't want to use your phone, because that is a little bit more cumbersome, you have to have the whole clip and you got to carry them around and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, okay, that can be a little annoying, so you can just get a cloud-based platform instead, or in this case, a remote play controller, which, by the way, could maybe even improve the overall experience. That's kind of the thing here, though. I want to reserve my judgment of this thing for the time being. It does sound weird on paper, but maybe they come out and reveal this new, again, quote-unquote handheld controller, or whatever you want to call it, and they reveal it vastly improves on remote play in a way that we're not currently aware of. Even though this report here says it requires internet, maybe that will change, or maybe it won't necessarily need good internet to yield great results. So I still think that there's more that we need to kind of know here. If anything else, I do think that there will be at least a small market for this, though that internet question, it's an important one, as that will kind of make it or break it for, I think, a lot of people out there, especially depending on its price tag. Let's go talk about Nintendo, though. They're having a pretty big week with the launch of Super Mario Bros. The movie. It's tracking to be a huge release. I know a lot of you all are excited to watch it as well. But if you prefer to just play the games, well, it sounds like some news might be incoming. So this is coming directly from Shigeru Miyamoto himself, as he was asked in an interview by Variety. Now that we have the movie and Super Nintendo World Amusement Park, when can we expect a new Mario game? In which he slyly responded with a joyful smile. Well, all I can say is please stay tuned for future Nintendo Directs. So, okay, this has caught a lot of attention online. On one side, this isn't really necessarily the most shocking news in the world, considering I think that we all know that Nintendo is indeed working on a new Mario game. That's not exactly news, but the way that he responded here, that's where I think that this certainly needs to be talked about. It did almost sound like he was referring to a soonish Nintendo Direct, like an announcement might be coming sooner rather than later. I mean, if you think about it, and I think most of us already knows this, but Nintendo's future plans after Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, it's one big mystery. I mean, we do know that Pikmin 4 is coming this July, but for the most part, we know very little from Nintendo and what's happening in the second half of 2023. So a new Direct that focuses on the second half of 2023 is likely around the corner. My guess is June or July, which is where Nintendo would typically put their E3-like showcase. But now with this tease here from Shigeru Miyamoto, maybe Nintendo has plans to announce a new Mario-based game at that Direct. Now, to be fair, though, what does that actually mean? Mario encompasses a pretty large library of games by this point, so for all we know, he could just be teasing a spin-off, so we can't necessarily rule that out. But at the same time, we are getting to that point where a new big-time Mario game would make a lot of sense. It's kind of hard to believe, but it's been nearly 6 years since the release of Mario Odyssey. Now, they did re-release Mario 3D World with Bowser's Fury in 2021, but that wasn't quite the same as a completely new Mario game. So again, it is getting to that point where a completely new 3D Mario game is to be expected. Now, could it possibly release this year? Well, I think that kind of depends on what Nintendo's plans are. I do think that it makes perfect sense to line up the next big Mario game with the movie. Releasing a big game the same year of its movie could be a winning combination. We've seen in various cases already, successful movies and shows do reflect on games. Take a look at Cyberpunk, take a look at The Witcher, or even The Last of Us Part 1. The only thing for me, though, is that I do kind of wonder if Nintendo wants to hold on to the next big Mario game to launch it alongside their next platform. And there are still questions as to when that successor will actually release. It does seem like everything's kind of pointing to 2024 right now, but I mean, I guess we'll see. In the meantime, though, Nintendo does have to release something in 2023 with or without that Switch successor, and maybe that could be a big Mario game. If anything else, though, a big Mario game should be relatively close, whether that be for the Switch or its eventual successor. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day that where I asked you all, if Sony were to make a handheld strictly for PlayStation 5 remote play, would you buy one? And we did talk about this just a little bit ago, but as you can see here, it doesn't seem like most of you all are on board as of this moment, with 82% of you saying no, what's the point, while 12% of you all said yes for the right price. So, I mean, yeah, it definitely seems like this is going to be more of a niche market. Again, that price is going to be very important, as well as internet connectivity. I think that if they could do this without internet connectivity, a lot more people would be interested in it. But as it's currently being explained, at the very least, I think that they need to make it to where it's a big improvement over remote play options that we currently have. But either way, I do view this as more of a controller with a screen rather than a quote-unquote handheld console. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you like the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.